5 stars. All right, so today we're going to jump into the Kahoot. We're going to do both theory and practice for stress today. We are going to flip it around. So Janae is going to lead our fantastic activity, which I'm excited about. We'll spend the last few minutes addressing some midterm Q&As. We've got quite a few questions about that, so I want to make sure that we're addressing that for you. And then we will exit together. All right, so take it away, future Dr. Best.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, so the number to join or the pin is 4444849. Three, two, one. Okay, and the first question is, which of the following influenced how people cope and the outcomes of COVID? Individual differences in personality traits and resources, different kinds of stress and their details, interpersonal and cultural context, or all of the above? Oh, okay. Come on, y'all. Which of the following is not a basic feature of the critical race theory? Race consciousness, contemporary orientation, praxis, or theory-informed action, centering in the mainstream rather than in the margins. Okay, tad bit tricky. Research on structural racism should address interactions among multiple forms of racism. True or false? Oh, that was fast. Good job. Blank refers to the ability to read, recast, and resolve the language of racially stressful encounters. Racial socialization, racial literacy, preparation for bias, coping. Dr. Anderson would be so happy if you guys get this right. All right, okay.
I'll take it. I'll get somewhat hype about that. Thank you.
Positive attitude was the main protective factor against stress for COVID-19 healthcare workers in Barber et al. 2020. True or false? Or Babor, excuse me. Okay. The coping strategies among healthcare professionals article found which factors are associated with high distress levels. A, being female and working on the front line. B, having children. C, not having children. D, both A and C. Okay. A study of a single form of racism would lead to a complete understanding of the issue and basic question of disparity. True or false? Okay. Critical race theory challenges beliefs that race consciousness is to racism and color blindness is to absence of racism. True or false? Okay, let's see who's on the podium. Oh, okay. It's Gabby, Allison, and okay, cool.
Way to go, team. Awesome work. All righty. So
I'm pressing escape, but for some reason. Ooh.
oh, on your save. Did you mean just for screen share or for the saving thing? Okay, so I think we're all set. All righty, so let's jump back to where we are here. All right, this, let me just say, is my absolute favorite topic on the planet. So stress and coping is the industry, the construct, all the things that I was born and raised in. So we were talking last week about competency and how there might be certain topics, as an example, as a professor, that I might be more comfortable and confident about. I told Janae last week when we were prepping, I was like, I could do this in my sleep. Like, stress and coping is my jam. So feel free to ask all the questions that you want today, mainly in the chat, because there's a lot that we're going to try to get through at once. But if you have questions, this is my jam. I would be happy to answer it. So we're looking at this picture. We've got two zebras hanging out. One is indicating that they have a lot of stress, and it's almost as if they are unraveling. That's what it looks like for this baby zebra. So I want to know for you all what might be your unraveling. What does it look like for you? So if you can, this would typically be a peer conversation, but today we're going to just jot down the following as an individual, and then we'll come as a whole group and have some volunteers share a bit of what they think. One, what is stress? Like, what is the definition? What does it mean? What does stress mean? Two, I want to know what the three biggest sources of stress are for you right now. So jot those down as well. For the third question, I want to know what are ways you deal with stress. How do you cope with stress? What does that look like for you? And the fourth thing that I'm interested in is how might stress look like for populations you care about. So as you all know, I'm very interested in Black populations, especially those in Detroit. So I might answer that about my population. You all have been keeping your populations of interest in mind. So tell me a bit about what stress might look like for them. So again, by yourself, what is stress? What are the 3 biggest sources of stress for you? What are the ways you deal or cope with stress? And then how might stress look like for populations you care about? We'll take about a minute to jot those down. All right, so as folks are finishing up, this is going to be catered to the people who have never said anything in this class at all. You know who you are. I need to hear from you. It is week 8. Some of y'all I have never seen in my life, never heard from you, and I want to see you. I want to hear from you. So folks who've never spoken at all, come off mute. Tell me, what is stress? What do you think stress is beyond Dr. Anderson making you come off mute and saying something in a class that you don't want to say anything about? What do you think the definition of stress is?
I'll go.
Hey, Bria.
So I think that stress is kind of, in my perception, more so a feeling of like emotion or physical tension based off, I guess this is not the best word to say, but like a stressor. So maybe like an event, deadlines, whatever it is, just like an intense feeling.
Awesome. And Brea, you did a great job in saying really that it can be a feeling, how we might describe like an emotion-based feeling, but you also said a physical feeling as well. So you tapped into both of those. It can be in our bodies or maybe even in our minds about an event, a precipitative event that leads us to feel that way. Great, great job, Brea. Thank you so much. One other person who has not said a nary nan nothing this whole class. Tell me what you think stress is. Do you agree with Brea? Do you have more to add? Go ahead.
Okay, I think, so I agree with what was said before, but then also I think stress can come from feeling overwhelmed. So I think that's a big part of it, a feeling of being overwhelmed and or either anticipation or trepidation for something that's coming.
Fantastic. So it's, thank you, Maya. It's a way that we're even not being present focused, right? We're anticipating, and that's such a great way of thinking about what stress is. All right, this is going to be my favorite opportunity. I'm going to try to read all this. I want you all to drop stressors just one by one in the chat for your 3 biggest sources of stress. Go, jot them down, throw them in the chat. School, money, election, group projects with politics, school, the world, life, health, midterms, health, breakout rooms, no, sleep, collection, relationships, work, personal life, future career, health, future politics, trauma, safety, adulting, same, family, midterms, can openers, Brandon, totes, residency, whoop, whoop, go ahead, partners, speaking into a mic, sorry, Mohammed, exercise, totally, Jackson. Fantastic, great work, everyone. So these are really common things. Most people had really similar things. I would say the can opener is one thing that I have never heard before. So 5 stars on surprising this 36-year-old. I've never heard of that before as a stressor. But most of the other things were kind of in the same kind of categories. And it's pretty consistent with folks your age, those things that popped up. So the stressors that are around you right now are things that a lot of your peers seem to also be facing. So let me grab some folks who have not said anything on the mic, and again, who I'm stressing out right now, even by asking, what are the ways then that you typically deal with stress? What does coping look like for you?
Hi, I know. I'd like to do this thing I call productive procrastination, where I'll just like start cleaning, or I'll go on a walk, or I'll just like sit down and read for like 30, 40 minutes, where I'm like still procrastinating on something, but like at least I'm being productive in some way.
Yes, that's a great one, Elizabeth. Thank you. How about two other people? What are the ways that you deal with stress?
I same thing, but like I exercise. So like I would be like, okay, I'm procrastinating, but I'm gonna go on a run, or like I'll wake up early and cycle instead of actually doing work.
Okay, we've got some productive procrastinators. Thank you for that, Ramonda. There was one other person about to jump in.
Oh yeah, it was me. I was gonna say just watching like comedy movies to kind of calm me down and just get my pheromones going. So yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So watching comedy movies. I do that with probably, I think with YouTube. So if I have a small break, I'll get just like a 3-4 minute comedy clip in, and it makes me happy. So I share that with you as well. All right. And if you have some other ones, I see that the chat is popping. I don't know what's going on in there, but if you do want to add some really awesome activities or some coping strategies, you can definitely drop them in the chat. Oops, sorry, for your colleagues. Go back to be able to get some of your strategies. And we'll have some time a little bit later to talk about it as well. All right, and final question for the folks who have not said nothing to me yet. How might stress look like for populations you care about? I'm looking for 2 people to hold me down on this one. So tell us a bit about who your population is and what some of the stressors are that might pop up for them.
Hi, this is Yasmina speaking. So my population that I care about is, well, I care about everybody first and foremost. I just want to say that, but
yes,
my home country of Montenegro, we experienced genocide. And so PTSD is a really big issue. So I guess like, you know, the fear of possibly another war coming in. So that's a big stressor that's on the forefront all the time.
Thank you so much, Yasmina. Maybe 1 or 2 other people.
Hi, I can go.
Thanks, Jasmine.
So similar to you, Dr. Anderson, my population is also Black people in Detroit, as I'm a Black woman from Detroit. And so a lot of the stress I see, especially like with my family, but in general, is the stress of money or lack of food. And that's something that I would like to like help with.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jasmine. Anyone else really want to share this one?
I can go too. My population that I care about is also Black women. And something that I think about specifically that was kind of also a part of my life is just the idea of single parent households and like working and trying to take care of a child at the same time. And that can be really stressful. So
yeah. Thank you. And actually, Ms. Harris, we have, this is one of the classes that you and I talked about in office hours last year. So I'm excited to hear what new stuff you have developed and thought about in this year as you're going to change the world as we know. So super excited to hear some of these things later. So thank you all so much for participating in this. I'll be honest and do some self-reflection here. When I taught this class last year for this specific course, I was in a very bad place of stress. And I actually wrote down all of the sources of stress for me. So I went past the 3 and I wrote down, it had to be, I mean, a solid 20 things that were just stressing me out. And just the sheer act of writing it and seeing it on paper really helped me. But then some of the things that I also processed throughout the rest of the class, like what strategies I used to cope, what are the things that I want to do with it, actually are really helpful, was really helpful for me. And I just want to acknowledge I'm in a very different place than I was 1 year ago when this was taught, which for me, like just saying that out loud is really impactful. And I'm saying that at the beginning because when we're wondering how do we actually apply stress and coping theories, one of the reasons that I think I gravitate most towards stress and coping as a psychologist is because when you can actually see the difference that it makes in someone's life or have a marker like this, like a 1 year difference, it makes me feel really happy and glad. So just wanted to acknowledge that change is possible. And I think today we're really going to get a chance to see how do we make tangible, real changes, even if it's something that's very brief, very short in intervention. So I'm sorry, there's so much going on my screen. All right, so we had a lot of really amazing responses as to what stress is. And so technically we're thinking about something that is limited in resource when there are competing demands. So if we don't have a lot to contend with the multiple things that are in our world. So the picture that you see here are a lot of the same things that you all already described as the things that are stressful for you, right? So money, work, school, working out, like all those relationships, all those things are in this picture. They're competing demands, and we really only have two hands. It would be great if we had these many hands, but we only have two to deal with all this stuff. So people tend to do a primary appraisal. They think about why, or like, what is this thing in front of me? I'm feeling this pressure either in my mind or in my body. I loved, again, that physical and emotional way of thinking about it, right? So it sometimes isn't just how we think in our minds or that buzzing. I call it the Charlie Brown kind of like buzz, where there's the squiggly line at the top of your head and you know that there's stress happening. But it can also be our shallowness of breath or our quickened blood pressure or heart rate. So we know that it's happening in our bodies. And so sometimes we try to make an appraisal of it, which means like, what do we think is going on? So it might be that it's not significant. Maybe it's just, okay, we're not even going to worry about it right now. There's no significance to it. There's positive stress, like a lot of people might describe having a child or getting married as a positive outcome, but it's still stressful in the moment because of the definition. It's limited resources with competing demands. Or more popularly, we might think of it as a threat to our well-being. So that's one of the more popular ways of thinking about what stress is. So if it's a threat, we typically utilize a secondary appraisal. So we have to think about what we're going to actually do to absolve ourselves of this feeling of stress. We might go internal and think about our own willpower, our own resources to deal with it. Or we might look externally, like a support group, or thinking about what resources other people or things have that can lift some of this burden off of us. If some of you don't know that I do this is my colleague, Dr. Sean Jones. He's a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. We have this organization called Our Mental Health Minute, and our goal is to reduce stigma in the Black community around mental health and well-being. So we create very short videos, hence the 1-minute video that's coming up in a few weeks that is going to be due, and we're going to be showing some of our videos as examples. But we create very quick videos or very quick podcasts to address some of these common constructs that are popular within the mental health field. So take a quick listen to our award-winning stress and coping video. I'm not even kidding, we won a total award on this. So take a listen to what we have to say about stress and coping in this video. Sean, what is eating you? Are you okay?
Look, Ree, I mean, it's barely the beginning of a new year. I've already broken a resolution. I still don't understand what happened with the election. I don't know what's gonna happen on season 2 of Insecure. My family is off the chain, and I have mad work to do. It's just a lot on my plate, you feel me?
Yeah, but sometimes it's not as simple as what's on your plate. It's kind of like a pizza.
Ree, I know I can be cheesy, but I don't think I understand.
Okay, so you got 3 main ingredients, right? You've got the sauce, you've got the cheese, and you've got the meat.
Wait, no veggies?
Focus, my brother. Okay, say the sauce represents all the things that your family passes down to you genetically. And the cheese represents like your mood and your personality. And the meat represents all the things that are going on in the world right now.
Okay, so like biological, psychological, and social stuff.
You got it. In fact, we call that the biopsychosocial model of stress and how it impacts your life. So say you have too much sauce. Okay, and not a lot of cheese. And sometimes, you know, the meat just takes right on over the whole pizza, you know, man. Depending on the way that these ingredients interact, sometimes you can experience stress more than at other times of your life or than for other people.
No, actually that makes a lot of sense because, I mean, I feel like we're basically dealing with the same things, but you're always so much cooler and calmer.
Right.
So, Reed, what do I do about the stress pizza that is my life?
Well, first let's focus on this actual pizza, and then we could talk about how to cope with the stress in your life.
Bet. I'm hungry anyways.
True. I'm Reed.
And I'm CT.
And this is our Mental Health Minute.
In 30 minutes or less.
the pressure.
Okay, so I'm excited to read the chat after we're done with that. All right, so of course it does. It always does that. All right, so we mentioned in the video this idea of the biopsychosocial model of stress. And it's really the definition of how we think about why stress impacts us and picks up some of the comments that were made earlier today about what stress is. It's not any one of these things discretely. It's how within our bodies, within our minds, and within the world around us, these elements come together like we see in this Venn diagram to make up how stress is perceived and received by us. So it influences our behavior, our emotions, and our cognitive functioning. And one of the things that I mentioned in the video that I think is really important is that different combinations of these three elements, the biological, the social, and the psychological, impact us interpersonally and also intrapersonally. So what do I mean by that? My combination of where I am in my life today of biological, social, and psychological elements might give me a certain stress level. But relative to maybe 10 years ago, I may have had the exact same makeup of those elements, but because I had less life experience or hadn't dealt with it before, maybe I was more stressed out at that point 10 years ago, even though I had the same makeup of all of these things. Or like Sean and I were saying, we could be dealing with the exact same types of makeup, but because he's a different person, he might feel stressed differently than I do. So it's never fair to say, oh, well, we're dealing with the same things. Or like we both live in the same world, we should be equally stressed. That's not true. These elements interact or like combine or bake, if we are using the ingredient kind of reference, they are going to make a different model of stress in your own body or in your own mind relative to someone else or at other times of life. So that's what biopsychosocial model of stress means. And that's why we can't look at any one of these elements separately. It's about how do they interact that make up stress in our lives. So one of the articles that you read about with respect to one of the most common models of stress and coping is the transactional model of stress and coping by Lazarus and Folkman. Here we would say an external stressor's impact on health is mediated by the person's assessment or appraisal of the stressor and the psychological, social, and cultural resources at their disposal. So a very basic model of this would be that there is a stressor that causes us stress. We think about when we say mediate, that means the thing that's eating up the potential relationship from stress to my outcome. So what's the thing in the middle that's mediating or eating up or tells us more information about that stress and health outcome? It's how I think about it or how I appraise it, and then what I use to deploy my resources. So that's coping, right? Once I've thought about what I want to do with it, do I actually engage those resources to do something about that stress? Or do I kind of let it continue eating away at me? Both are coping strategies, but one might be more productive to my outcomes, whereas the other might be more harmful to the outcomes. So this is at its basic, at the basic level, what we would see as the transactional model of stress and coping. A stressor stresses us out. We have to think about what we want to do about it and how we do something about it, the quality with which we do something about it, the amount of resources at our disposal to do something about it is going to impact our outcomes, which can be health, psychological, et cetera. Okay, this is it more complicatedly, right? So a stressor is going to lead to various types of appraisal. It's going to lead to different types of coping strategies and efforts, but it's still going to make its way to outcomes. So this is a very complicated TMSC, but nonetheless, you can see again how a stressor can impact the way that we think about what we do about and how we react to that initial stressor. So again, don't worry as much about all of the constructs here, but just be mindful that there's the major takeaway is that we get stressed. What do we do about that stress? And then how do we react to or respond to that stress as a result of what's in that middle component? Questions or comments here before I keep moving? Okay, I'm gonna keep rolling, but let me know if you have any questions. So you've got the basic idea of what stress is. You've said it beautifully. You already know within your own bodies and selves what it is, what it feels like, what it looks like. So the reason why we're talking about stress and coping in this this component of class that's moving a little bit away from the self. It may feel like, well, aren't we dealing with stress in our own bodies and our own selves? Like, shouldn't this be more of the individual level theories? Well, we're moving more into the intrapersonal, because it's stress is not just what's going on with you. Again, there's a social component, and then there are people who think of it in a sociological way as well. So some of the theories that we're going to be looking at in just a moment really think about what's the interplay between the self and their greater society. So stressors come from our social structures and systems of stratification. Structural factors can impact each phase of the stress process. So let's take a look at some stress models that take this basic TMSE framework, but then build upon it to learn how do we apply it to either certain populations or to certain stressors in particular. So the minority stress model, for example, we didn't do this in our readings this year, but thinking about how elements of minority, quote unquote, status, that's the name of this model in the 90s, but how elements of minority status can impact the ways in which folks cope. So taking a look, going from A, the circumstances in the environment, the stressor, B, the identity, the being mindful of your status. So Myers and colleagues thought a lot about sexual orientation with respect to this model. And again, these are the terms that were used in the early 90s to describe this model. And I know that we have, we utilize a different set of language now. So some of this might feel a bit outdated, but sexual orientation was the primary minority status that Myers and colleagues thought about, but also being mindful of race, ethnicity, or gender, and how these things interplay with each other is going to compound and going to change the way that the circumstances in the environment impact this individual. You can see then that this idea of general stress and minority stress processes in particular. So thinking about what's unique to the people within these identity groups, how might they process things differently with things like discrimination or prejudice? How can their experience of expecting rejection or internalized elements of some of these racial identities, how can they impact the ways that people even experience whether there are enough resources to contend with this? So you're going to hear this a few times with this idea of even if I wanted to cope with it, what are the resources at my disposal to do something about it? And how those processes then impact these mental health outcomes. So it's not as simple as that model that I showed you, just those three constructs of what's the stressor, how do we deal with it, and how does that dealing with it or the coping impact our outcome. There's so many smaller boxes that really say, based on your identity, what is it that stress is going to do to you? And because of your identity, are you going to experience unique stressors that other people would not in their general stress models? So this is the Myers minority stress model here. Another model by Clark et al. This is one of my favorite papers. And again, David Williams is the author on this, no surprise. But a Clark et al. It's a racism biopsychosocial model of stress. So it's thinking about how does racism in particular, if that's the event or the stressor, work through the same biopsychosocial elements that we've already talked about, but lead to an appraisal that's really unique. So in this way, what Clark and colleagues, and actually Clark was a researcher at Wayne State, so did a lot of Detroit-based work, and you can look up some of the Clark papers to look at what's going on with Detroiters in particular. But if I appraise it as inherently racial, and I have a link there if you want to see some more corny videos that Sean and I do, this is our racism video, you can take a look at if I correctly identify it as racial, or if I identify it as a stressful thing, but maybe it's not a racial thing, that's another type of appraisal I might engage in. Or I might not even try to identify it. I want to put it behind me. I don't even want to see it. So I might appraise it as no stress at all. What Clark and colleagues say is that engaging in coping, identifying it as a stressor of some sort, is going to be beneficial to your psychological and physiological and health-related outcomes here. So they encourage you to see racial stressors as what they are. And in fact, if you see it as a different stressor, what they say is that you're going to be trying to cope with the wrong thing. So you're actually going to have negative outcomes here. But the more you can accurately appraise it, the more you can cope appropriately with what it is. And in this case, again, it's racism. What they argue and what people try to do with this avoidant coping, they say it doesn't exist, we don't have to worry about that, is that they're going to still be coping with it at the end of the day. That's still a coping strategy, is what they argue. But because they're not attending to the right thing, it's going to like take longer, and they're still going to be negatively impacting the psychological, physiological, and health-related outcomes. So essentially, Clark et al. In this paper say for folk of color and for Black people in particular, to be well during the stress and coping process, the important piece is to appraise what's going on accurately as racial so we can get to the coping process in a faster and better way. I'm checking out the chat just to make sure. So Taz asks, could prior experience impact how someone copes or only impact how painful the stress is? Both, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Janae, for handling that. Okay, then there was this article that your professor, I guess you would say, like, was trying to give herself some credit, I don't know. But she came up with this theory as well. And this one actually goes across just any one person. This is actually a family-based model. So what I'm going to do is highlight some of the elements to discuss it real quick. This is also going to be helpful for Wednesday's class when we get into how racism impacts us as a public health issue. But this is thinking again about racism as a specific type of stressor. So racial discrimination, which leads to racial stress, which if we don't do anything about it, can lead to exactly what we just saw from Clark and colleagues' paper. So we could be negatively coping with it or avoidant or maladaptive. There's a lot of ways to think about not coping appropriately with the racial stress that's in front of us. And then our outcomes, like psychological, like physiological, academic, and the list goes on, can be negatively impaired by not coping with these things appropriately. What we argue in our theory is that the elements here, and these are actually all constructs now that you're familiar with. So this idea of racial socialization competency, racial socialization is the talk. So not the birds in the, but within typically Black families, but a lot of families of color, parents and children have to have a conversation around what happens when you get pulled over, what happens in situations where a store clerk might be looking at you in a certain way, a teacher might say a disparaging comment. So what happens when racial stuff pops off is what the talk is all about. Competency, as you learned last week, is how well you can do this thing. What are the skills? What are the stress levels? What's the confidence that families have to engage in this type of conversation effectively? So this is not just a parent level. It's not just a child level. It's what's the transmission? What's the talk back and forth like? How well can families do that talk? Then we're going to think about how well or how able do children feel they can cope with it. So before we even get to coping, this also addresses Taz's question as well. Before we even get to coping, I don't know how well I can do something until I'm able to think about the possibilities. So for a lot of racial stress, you get shut down before you even engage in a coping strategy because the world has told you it doesn't matter if you put your hands up, it doesn't matter if you lay on the ground. It does, like nothing that you do right now is going to matter if that cop or if that whomever feels that way about you. That's a narrative that might be playing out for some of the people engaged in these racially stressful moments. So what we're trying to do in the talk is to increase the amount of coping strategies that children perceive, and that coping self-efficacy is going to boost their ability not only to think about it, but to believe that they can do those things. Your family is supporting you. We've talked through, we've practiced what it is that you can engage in, Now we want to see what it is that you actually do. That's where we go back to racial coping and we see those outcomes. So my theory isn't as different as some of the ones that you saw before, but now we're going in between levels. We go from a personal level with what it is that you've personally experienced with respect to discrimination, or with what it is that your parents have experienced, because that's also a type of discrimination that impacts kids. But then we go back to what it is that your parents and you are thinking about, and then how you as a youth are taking that information in, thinking about how it is that you want to act, then acting, and then we see outcomes as a result of that. So now we're going in between levels in order for Black youth in particular to be well. So that's what Recast is all about. Very kind of you all in the chat. All right, so with respect to major findings, I just want to be mindful of time because I know that Janae has an awesome activity for you. So I want to kind of scoot through the next few slides. Basically, we know that stress really is damaging to physical and mental health. It's a substantial impact. Differential exposure results in social class inequalities in physical and mental health. We know that discrimination writ large harms folk of color. And we know that life course stress widens health gaps. What we also know, some of the work that I just showed you with respect to competency, is that stress on health can be reduced with high levels of mastery, self-esteem, and or social support. You also saw that in the COVID paper, right? That this idea of a positive sense of self or a positive outcome reduced some of the stress that folks were experiencing with COVID. There's a coping video, so I'm going to show you all this very quickly. So this is the companion of the stress video. So now that we've talked about what stress is, the different theories that make up what specific types of stressors people might face, now let's talk about some of the ways that folks might cope with it. So what does coping look like by ReNCT? Oops. Okay. Are you ready to get something to eat? Sean. Sean!
Oh, Dad, yo, I figured out how to deal with my stress. Salon got the answers.
Tell me more.
Okay, she says I can drink it away. She says put one in the air. She says I can dance it away. She says I can change it with my hair.
How you gonna do that though?
Anyways, she says I can keep myself busy. She says I can even work it away.
So Sam, she's giving you all the coping strategies.
Exactly, I have a whole notebook. I mean, which do you think I should do?
Well, you can do emotion-focused coping, which helps us to reduce the impact of stress, especially when you don't have control over the situation.
Like racism.
Message.
Or like losing a loved one.
Yeah, I mean, eating, drinking, distracting yourself, avoiding, they're all techniques, but sometimes they can be problematic, especially in excess.
All right, you're right. I mean, I have heard that small things like working out, journaling, meditation and prayer, even laughter can all ease stress.
Yeah, even if you think about it differently, it can help to reduce the sting of the problem.
Okay, but what if I want to get at the source of my stress?
Problem-focused coping. Yeah, when it's possible, it's typically more effective to get at the underlying problems. Say that you have like a busy semester or something like that, like trying to get at, do I set up a schedule for studying or do I contact a tutor or something like that? And if you hit up folks that you really trust, like us. I'm Reed.
And I'm CT.
And this is our Mental Health Minute.
Well, it's like graves in the sky.
All right, so we've got two types of coping that Sean and I talked about in the video. So on the one hand, we've got problem focus where we have control over the stressor and we can manage the problem. This is when we talk with loved ones, we journal, we tackle the obstacle rather than procrastination and conflict that some people mentioned before, right? But sometimes we have emotion-focused coping, which may feel really good in the moment. So you saw Sean with some liquor. We've also addressed some things that might sound good in that meantime, even though it's not addressing the actual problem. So exercising was brought up, or cleaning. Like those are all great things, but they have that's when sometimes we don't have as much control over the situation, or we just want to avoid it. And so that might be, again, substance abuse, distance from what it is that we're trying to do, or just avoiding it, generally speaking. So that doesn't actually help to reduce the stress long term or to change the circumstances of the stressor, but it might be a way to engage in making our emotions feel better in that moment. I'm going to skip through a few of these because I want to get to, okay. So there are a few different interventions with respect to the practice side. So I want to make sure that we're thinking about not just theory, but how do we actually do stuff about it? So biofeedback, seeing the level of stress that we have from getting information about our blood pressure or our heart rate. So knowing, getting that data and actually being able to do something about reducing it is what biofeedback is. In deep relaxation, you may have heard about PMR, or progressive muscle relaxation, when you intentionally tense something up like your shoulders and then release. So you can start from your head all the way to your toes. Sean and I actually have a podcast on that with respect to racial stress. So I can drop that in our announcements for the week. But we run through a PMR strategy with you from your head to your feet. And we also engage in deep breathing exercises as well. So those are some strategies to actually reduce stress that folks feel. And then there's cognitive behavioral intervention. So we'll get into a few of those today, and actually with Janae's activity as well. So we'll aim to achieve accurate primary appraisal, so to think appropriately about what it is that's stressing you out, and to really actually evaluate what resources you have to make a change in that stressful encounter for you. So that's what cognitive behavioral is, and we'll get into that in a bit. Someone is off mute. I just want to let you know in case something pops off at your house, just throwing that out there, but someone is off mute and I'm hearing a little bit from you. Okay, so some folks, I was able to read the chat a bit while the coping video was up. Some people were talking about populations that they're working with and how there are a lot of things that are happening right now, and they want to think about what they can do for their populations or their community. So here are some of the community and structural level interventions. We might reduce exposure to toxic stress and trauma, or create trauma-informed services and communities. Where there might be environmental modifications if things are happening in certain areas by smokestacks or by radioactive elements. Like, how do you create policy that actually changes the environment so that those people are not as stressed, both in their mind and in their bodies? The public health goals that we set, can we monitor? Can we return to? Can we make a difference in the way that people might feel in engaging in some of those goals? And then legislation is a very real element to structural and community level interventions. So I'm going to drop this here. I won't spend too much time on it, but essentially data is going to be so incredibly important to evaluate with stress. So you want to, again, get a really good sense of an appraisal. What is it that I'm actually doing? What's the context? What's the culture? Who is the population? And what's the problem? What can be done? You really want to get to these granular level. What is it that I even want to do? What is it that I'm doing something about? What is the stress? Like, you really want to get to answer that question. Okay, I'm going to drop this here with respect to what it is that you can do. So you want to have solid relationships, even if it's one solid relationship, that the data and the literature on this show just how important that is to feel like you can function and to feel valued. I'm dropping a few self-care tips. I know we're in the middle of the semester, so midterms was something that popped up. Just school in general was something that popped up. So think about small interventions for yourself, like 5 minutes per day, right? An hour per week might be too much for some people to think about, but even 5 minutes a day to meditate, to take a walk, to take a bath, or to unplug might be really helpful for your thriving. And then to build community. So I know we tried in this class to create small groups if you need them. And I know Janae is going to talk about community in a bit, but creating community, and again, having at least one solid relationship can really help you to thrive. If you want, we're not going to do this right now, but if you want, you can look at this vignette to try to identify what the stressor is, what appraisal was being identified, what's the coping strategy and what's the solution or the outcome. This can help you to think about, have you correctly identified what those constructs are? I'm not going to spend time today because I just want to make sure that Janae has enough time. So this idea of resilience is something that people have asked about before, but remember that resilience is the process of adapting in the face of adversity, which is a significant source of stress. So we're not talking about some of the smaller stressors or the day-to-day stressors that we might feel. It means really, how do we address adapting well in the face of adversity? And if we're talking a bounce back from difficult experiences, not just a like getting through something or feeling a little stressed out. We're talking like a natural disaster, for example, or really going through a community level stress that just wears at you on a very consistent basis. So I'm happy to talk about resilience if we have time at some point, but there are some links here if you wanted to there's some links on this slide, and then also some quotes here on this next slide that get more at resilience. All right, so let's jump into one intervention in particular that I wanted to highlight from a practical standpoint. So one common intervention is cognitive behavioral therapy. You all may have heard about this, or some of you may have, but essentially cognition, or our thoughts, behaviors, what it is that we actually do, and our feelings, the emotional element, are part of the cognitive triangle. And I always use this example. Can I get one person to come off mute just so I can kind of use this example? If somebody wants to come off mute, be my volunteer. One person, I promise. It's not bad. I'm not gonna bite.
I can volunteer someone.
Oh, I thought you were gonna volunteer, Janae.
I can do it.
Oh, okay.
I don't know who the me is. Who's the me I'm talking to?
Alex.
Hi, Alex. All right, Alex. Okay. So you moved into a new apartment and it's 2 a.m. You are tucked away in your bed, sleeping soundly and peacefully. And you hear a crash in the kitchen. What do you think that crash is?
I don't have any roommates.
You do not have any roommates.
I would probably not jump to home intruder. I would probably think like something fell.
Okay, it's like a series of crashes.
Oh, then yeah, someone's in my house. I'd be scared.
Okay, so you think someone's in your house, you feel scared. What do you do? What's your behavior?
Hide, I guess.
Okay, great. You know what, Alex? Okay, you don't have roommates, but I forgot you do have a cat named Fluffy. I'm so sorry. I forgot to tell you that. Now, what is it that you think when you hear dishes crashing?
Ah, my cat.
That darn cat, Fluffy. That Fluffy, that's your thought. How do you feel about that?
Annoyed, but not scared.
Fluffy, sit down. And then what do you do as a result of that thought and feeling?
I wait for if Fluffy's not going to stop, I have to go deal with it. But if not, I just go back to bed.
I might even throw a pillow over my head like, Fluffy, keep crashing those dishes. I'll deal with it later. Alex, 5 stars. You get an official applause. Thank you so much. So Alex was able to just go through the cognitive triangle with me, in which sometimes our thoughts might jump to this active intruder model, right? Where something really bad is happening. I'm going to the nth degree and thinking about what is this like alarm or this warning that's happening. How do I feel? I'm really nervous, anxious, frustrated, like all those feelings that get bottled up. And what do I do about it? It might be hiding, it might be grabbing a knife. Like I might be doing a number of things to protect myself, but it with accurate appraisals, working with a therapist and really seeing the world for what it is, a lot of fluffy situations, but then sometimes a few intruder. And then like, what do we actually do to deal with those more extreme moments? But then more generally, how do we handle those fluffy situations? That's a very common intervention in the world of CBT. So some of the things that we might do to improve our cognitions or behaviors might be through something like a behavioral activation sheet. So there are two strategies that we might go about doing. One is to stop our automatic and unwanted negative thoughts. So that might be you testing a number of times. Is it fluffy or is it an intruder, right? So for every situation where you're feeling super heightened, super at a 10, super concerned, you're testing out, well, is it this or is it that? You're making a judgment on what's more accurate in that situation. Another thing might be, if we've been sitting a lot, we're feeling a bit down. In order for our mind sometimes to catch up to where our, wait, am I saying that right? Sometimes for our body to catch up to where our mind is, we have to actually activate the body, because again, from this triangle, you see that they're all interconnected. So our behavior can actually tell our thoughts or our feelings what to do as well. So here, if we're getting ourselves up, we're moving, then we're telling our mind, you don't have to necessarily stay behind or be afraid. You can actually be out. You can engage with the world. You're giving feedback from your behavior to your thoughts and to your emotions. So that's another way of actually changing some of those more stressful thoughts, is by getting your body moving as well. So this is often used for low mood or depression or anxiety, where we can get our bodies moving to tell our minds and our thoughts something else. I'm going to drop radical self-care in there. We're not going to discuss it today for time, but just being mindful that you need to fill your cup first. Sometimes people call that selfish, but in a day and time where, especially right now, where there's so much stress with so many things and on so many people, just a reminder that radical self-care is important, and it is not selfish, it is self-preserving. So just a reminder of that. Okay, we're gonna come back to Janae's activity rather than it being here, just so we can get through some of the questions, and then she'll explain why we're doing that last. So I wanted to, first of all, just take a break and get some stress and coping questions in if you have them, but also wanted to talk very quickly about the midterm. So I'm gonna come off of stop share here. So we've had a few questions, and I just wanted to address very briefly what the format is gonna be. So we'll have 60 multiple choice questions. Some of them have been shown already on Kahoot. Some are going to be new from a bank of questions that we have access to. I want to underscore, highlight, circle, asterisk, that this is going to be a shared learning exercise. So if you take your assessment and you aren't getting a score that's particularly high, but say none of your classmates are getting a score that's particularly high, that's data for Janae and I, for me to say, okay, we didn't teach that as well as we had hoped. We've got a lot to learn or a lot to think about, or maybe that question was actually something that we didn't even have covered. It wasn't in the readings, it wasn't in our class discussion. So I don't want you all walking into this saying, I got this score, this is the score that I'm going to have as the midterm, that's 20% of my grade. So I'm not going to say like, I'm going to use this curving strategy or I'm going to do this, but we're not going to take your grade and say, it is what it is, stamp, we're done. We're going to really be mindful about what is it that we've taught, what is it that we're seeing from these scores, how can we better improve our teaching strategy as well. So I just want to be very clear that it's a two-way street. This is data, but it's not the end of the day or the end all be all of your grade. So please just be mindful, do not stress as much as you can, because we're not doing this to like freak anyone out or to make you all study 100 hours. We really just want to see what it is that you've learned thus far and to give different assessment opportunities. So we've done some really creative homework assessments. We've done some Kahoot, so it's some kind of quick on your toes. So we just want to see what different assessment strategies also work for people as well. So collectively, take a deep breath in. We're going to take a slow exhale out. I see some of you are doing that. Others are still looking really scared at the screen. So I just want to, again, clarify 60 questions, multiple choice. You can take the entire hour and a half. I have noted that there are some people who are requiring extra time. I don't think that it's going to take you the hour to even do the 60 minutes. let alone an hour to do, or an hour and a half to do the 60, but I have noted all the people who have extra time. Again, from Kahoot and from the test bank, we'll have a few opportunities for some fun after your 60 questions as well. All right, questions from you all about what the heck it is that we're doing for the midterm. Will the exam be open note? I'm gonna say no to that. Can I be standing over your shoulder? I cannot. Are we gonna engage some of those strategies of like eye tracking stuff? Absolutely not. We're not gonna be doing all that. So I just want you to go into the exam with the knowledge that you have in your mind to do the best that you can do. But again, understand that our goal is not to punish you. It's not a punitive. We're not gonna be going nitty gritty to see if you read every single line. These are gonna be more general questions that we have. Okay, when are we taking it in class? We will send out a link for how it's administered at the top of class on Monday. So yes, regular lecture time on Monday next week from 1 to 2:30. We will send a link on how to take it. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I've never done school remotely before. I'm sure a lot of people are in the same boat.
Yeah.
So I know in some of our other classes that we have kind of that are lockstep in the program, like our biostatistics exams have been just done outside of class time. You could use classroom to do it, but it's done separately on Canvas. In this case, it sounds like there's going to be a link to something else, which is totally fine. But are we on Zoom while we do it? Like, what's the accountability like there?
Yeah, Janae and I have not figured this out. We too have not done online anything in our lives yet. So keep your eyes peeled and posted. I would say we meet on Thursday. We will figure this out. But I think the safest way of ensuring that everyone's on the same page is to plan for a Zoom next Monday. So come on in like you normally would. And at the very least, we will distribute the link in the chat if we have not figured out a different way to do it. But this is the first time actually even hearing about like a Canvas exam. So that's good information for me too.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks. So yes, Taz, we are going to be meeting in Zoom. We will figure it out, I promise. We'll be very clear about how this is going to look, but it's not punitive. We're not trying to punish anyone. The goal is to just see what you know. That's really it. That's how we're thinking about it and what we can do better. I think I addressed the questions that, okay. The access to past Kahoot, certainly from, if it was recorded, you can certainly see that. Janae, I don't know if there's any other way of seeing that. Mega, the Kahoot questions are questions that you all have come up with. Some are, again, y'all have opened up the book and like literally finished a sentence to see what your classmates know. That to me doesn't feel as representative as like, these are the major constructs of the HBM, which one is blank? Like that might be something that feels a bit more representative than we've opened up a book. What's the last few words of that sentence? Those are not questions that we would put on this exam. So we want to get just a very general sense of what you know about some of these theories or interventions or practices. I'm just reviewing the chat. Other questions? You can come off mute.
Will there be any kind of breakdown as to like how many questions per theory or like how to approach it? Like I'm assuming we're going to do everything like cumulative that we have studied up until now. But yeah, I guess just like kind of the structure on, is it going to be mostly based on readings or class discussions, kind of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I frankly don't know. I'll just keep it a buck with you. I don't know what it's looking like yet. I would say if we've had 8 weeks with like 6 of them focused on theory, you might expect about 10 or so per theory. I don't know, but I understand that this can be stressful for you because people are now asking like study guides or like what does the reading or what does it look like for specific readings? I know that's stressful, but I don't know. The answer is I don't know. I know that's very stressful, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so we finished a stress class. Now we might be sitting in stress. So can folks talk to me a bit about what it is that so we will reveal as much as we can after we get all of our questions together. So before Monday, you can have an expectation of what generally speaking is going to be covered. Is there anything else that would be helpful to reduce stress that you're feeling right now about the exam? Carly, I think you should be able to see your grades as they're going into the Canvas. So it should, if I'm not mistaken, give you kind of a sense of where you are with
Yeah, I can
grades that are.
usually see my grades, but it doesn't reflect the weight of them
Oh,
in the
okay.
grade. So I was just curious about that in particular.
Okay, we'll do some troubleshooting with respect to if Canvas can give an accurate representation with the weight. So we'll look into that. Yasmina said having a study guide or focus will be helpful. So we will work as hard as we can to get that to you by Friday. But I would, again, just encourage everyone to just, again, understand that this is a very low stakes. And I understand that the percentage looks high, and I want to just go back to this is us trying to just get a sense of different assessment strategies for different people and utilizing different techniques there. I'm not sure, Taz, so we'll look into, I doubt highly that you would get your feedback on what your test grade is immediately. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay. Last few questions or comments if you have them. Janae's going to look into Kahoot just to see what we can share. But again, to some degree, if we gave exactly like the list of them, you would have access to all the questions. So I'm not sure how we're going to work that out, but we will take a look into it. Any questions that haven't been asked or answered yet? Alrighty, so as we're finishing up, what is one thing that you learned today that you did not know? That we have mental health minutes. We have quite a bit. You can check us out at ourmhm.com to get all of our content. Thanks, Taz. What's one thing that you're going to apply to your life? So how to use different coping strategies. Awesome. Meditate, how to cope better. Awesome. And then for clarification stuff, again, we've got all of your notes down for what to do with the exam. So we will definitely keep that in very tight mind and what we want to do about it. Janae, I know we are leaving you with very little time and I apologize for that, but did you want to take it away with what we're going to be doing from an activity perspective?
Yes, of course. So considering that time is sort of short, you guys are willing to do this like in a modified version if you guys so choose. But we want you guys to think further about stress and coping in practice. And we also want you all to build community because that is one way to cope with stress. So we want to put you all in breakout groups, breakout rooms of 2. And so in these breakout groups, you all will exchange phone numbers if you guys are so able to. And the idea is that you all will get off of Zoom. So like as soon as you guys exchange numbers, call each other, get off of Zoom. And if possible, takes like some sort of walk while you're on the phone, get up out your seat at the very least, just like, you know, try to have some sort of movement. And the idea is that getting off of Zoom and moving around can be a way of coping with the stressor of virtual learning. Also, I just want to plug the support groups that we assign you guys to in the beginning of the semester and remind you guys to use these groups as a source of support. So the discussion questions, there's really like 3 sort of, so I'm going to drop them in the chat. But what ways have you practiced coping throughout the pandemic? What have you found effective or ineffective? Does your partner have tools that they're willing to share to help you to cope? And then second, how can we help academics, supervisors, our professors to consider the psychological impact of the pandemic? How can we essentially get professors to adjust accordingly? And then are there theories that come to mind that could be helpful in addressing any of these questions? And the idea here is that we sort of wanted these questions to be more practical and to be helpful for you guys in real life, because I know something that I've been trying to work through with professors and classes that I'm taking is like getting people to adjust their teaching and assignments accordingly because of like this odd space that we're all in and collective stress that we are all experiencing because of the unknown. So those are the questions. When you guys get into the groups, I will like send them again and you guys can screenshot them and then exit the call. So Dr. Anderson, would you mind splitting them up into 2s?
You also have a question about where the discussion groups are.
The support groups?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, it was in my announcement from a few weeks ago. So I can send that out again if that's helpful. Or you can just go to the announcement section of Canvas and the groups are attached in, I believe, an announcement from like about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, I'm just trying to drop Janae from the group. Where is she? Okay.
Dr. Anderson, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Basically, I remember you guys were saying like last week that we were gonna try to like meet in groups. Are you guys still trying to figure that out, or did I miss an announcement? Because I didn't know, like, there's been so many emails and I didn't know if I missed it, and I just wanted to still meet if that was possible.
Yeah, we have not created the groups yet. It's been really challenging. So we didn't get everyone to fill out their information. So we are still just trying to figure out the best way of doing that right now. So you haven't missed anything, but with respect to office hours, you're always welcome to schedule one with Janae after class from, it's 3 to 4, yes, on Mondays, Janae, is that right?
Yes.
So 3 to 4 on Mondays. And I know there was quite a bit of availability that people had then. And then mine, as always, is Tuesday, 12 to 1 for right now. But we are trying to figure it out, something serious.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to break folks out. So again, from what Janae's asked us to do, if you're comfortable sharing contact information, do that. We know that there's only a few minutes now between what some folks might have with respect to class at 2:30. But if you have just a few minutes now to get up and get moving, that would be great. If not, schedule some time to get up, get moving, and talk about how, talk about the 3 things that are in the chat here. So I'm going to open up all rooms. And you all have a great day. We'll see you soon. And Janae, I can broadcast this message.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, that's, oh, my, oh,
Dr. Anderson.
yikes. Yep.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm still in the main room. I am, right? Okay. Just before I went to the breakout room, I just wanted to ask, I was just wondering if I can ask you a few questions. Like like after the breakout room. I just don't want to leave the person hanging, whoever's in the breakout room. But I don't know if like I can reconvene to the main room really quickly or how to go about it.
Well, you can go ahead now. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. So I was just gonna I was just trying to put my thoughts together based on like the whole feedback on like what might facilitate some guidance for the exam.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I personally have been struggling a bit to just like keep track of some sort of structure of like what I'm responsible for knowing with each reading, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm being very clear. So I feel like if we had some kind of assessment or some kind of guidance weekly, like maybe like a quiz, and this could be like in the future or something like that. I just feel like weekly quizzes really hold me accountable for material, and it kind of keeps me from letting it pile, if that makes sense. Like it just like keeps me in a routine of like knowing exactly, or just like a framework of what some of the key takeaways might be and how they apply more conceptually. Because like the readings, like I read through them and it's like I get like a big picture concept, but then like it really freaks me out to think about, answering like 60 multiple choice questions about particular concepts perhaps where I might not have like the best sense of what these key components are. And so like now I'm feeling like a bit intimidated just by the amount of content and not having kind of like a grasp, I feel, on like week to week what some of these key things are. I don't know if I'm being super clear. I know that's like really vague.
No, it's not. That's helpful.
Just some kind of guidance. So like I know in some classes sometimes like at the end of 5 kind of like key points where you don't necessarily have to give us exactly what they are, but just some reference, like maybe like know this and this and how it connects to this, or like reflect on this concept or that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like just having a sense of kind of like where we should be going. I know like a few weeks ago I brought up how I was like, oh, I'm having a hard time knowing if I'm supposed to be building upon on these theories and how they apply professionally, or if it's more of like compartmentalizing them and thinking about them individually or how they overlap. So I feel like just some kind of framework on how to navigate through these theories would be super awesome, because it is a lot. And like I just think like kind of discussing a bit more about the application, but as well as like how conceptually like we should be thinking about these things and piecing them together. So yeah, I think weekly assessments might be like helpful just to like know what we're supposed to, like if we're on the right track in terms of how we're piecing information together.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's just a thought, and that's just like my personal experience, and I'm just sharing that with you.
Yeah.
Because of the upcoming midterm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Maria. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, Jackson is waiting for you. So go ahead on in there.
Will do.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye. Hi there.
Hi, I didn't know that this was, I didn't know if we were supposed to leave. But now that I'm here, I actually do have a question that maybe either one of you or both could answer. So I did want to know more about, so my future, well, actually, this is probably an office hours thing. I'll wait for an office hour time.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll wait for now because that's more, it doesn't have to do with the lecture today. But I wanted to say today's lecture was my favorite out of all of
cool.
every lecture this semester in all my classes. So I really no, seriously, I mean that because it's really what I want to study in the future. So it was very, very helpful.
Cool. I'm clearly here to talk about it anytime. So join me anytime for that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your days.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.